Okay, everybody, I'm back on here again, doing a Q&A, answering another question. People want to know, where did Cain's wife come from? Okay, and you first hear of her in Genesis chapter 4, verse 17. It says, Cain knew his wife. So basically, everybody's like, okay, well, where'd she come from, And a lot of people make doctrines out of this and turn it into something that said, well, there was people there before Adam and Eve, and, people go through all different types of stuff, and say there was people already on the earth and things like that. Actually, what happened was this. If you look back in Genesis chapter, well, I'll just say where she came from. Cain's wife, and it doesn't mention her name or anything, but his wife came from Eve. Cain basically married his sister, okay? If you look in Genesis chapter, it mentions Cain's wife in Genesis chapter 4, verse 17. If you look in Genesis chapter 3, verse 20, you'll see that Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. So basically, Cain's wife came from the mother, of course, which would be Eve. Now, the thing about this is Adam and Eve, they had several children, males and females that were not mentioned. There's a lot of males and females that's not mentioned in the Bible. So they didn't list everybody's name and everybody, how many different kids they had and stuff like that. That's why nobody knows how many kids Adam and Eve had. They do know that he had sons and daughters. That much they do know. But you only hear about Cain and Abel. Then you don't hear about any more of them. And all of a sudden you hear about Cain going away to the land of Nod, and he says he came in unto his wife and she bare a son. You go, wait a minute, where did this wife come from? It's because Adam and Eve were having more and more children, okay? And a lot of females was born, basically. And it's funny because nobody asked where, I think his name is Lamech. Nobody asked where his wives came from. But they're mentioned before Seth. Now, Seth is what a lot of people think is the third son that Adam and Eve had. Okay, so Adam and Eve talks about, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son. She said, I got another seed from the Lord to replace Abel, basically. So they said, oh, now we got one called Seth. Okay, and then Seth has a son and named him Enos. And then people begin to call on the name of the Lord. So you would think that, they just had a bunch of sons, and then after that it talks about Adam and Eve, had sons and daughters and stuff like that. So you think none of the daughters showed up until afterwards is what most people think. But actually, Adam and Eve did have sons and daughters, a lot of daughters, Nobody asked, I think it was Lamech, he went and took 2 wives. Okay, so if you think about it, okay, Cain went in unto his wife and gave birth to a son and named him Enoch. And then he built a city and named the city after his son Enoch. Then he talks about Enoch having a child and him having a child, and it starts going on down. It gets to Lamech, and it said he took 2 wives. Okay, where's all these wives that's, helping them have these children? Adam and Eve were having a lot of children, because God had commanded them, be fruitful and multiply, So that was one of the ways they was being fruitful and multiply. It just doesn't mention all the people who were born in that time. And so, you hear one of the people, Lamech, I think it was Lamech, who said he had killed a man. Okay, it doesn't say anything about I killed my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, going on up toward Adam. So then, who else was it? It wasn't Seth. So, it couldn't have been Abel because Cain killed him. So who else was it? There was more men and women born that the Bible doesn't mention. So you wonder, who was this man that he killed? So there's a lot of people who were not mentioned in this thing. So by the time Adam and Eve have Seth, and I'm just give you an idea of how much time, because you would think, Cain went off and he started having kids and wife and everything, and he's talked about generations after him. Then he talks about Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son. So you would think, this is maybe a few months later, maybe a year or so after Abel died or what have you. No, Seth was born, I think it was like 800 years. 800 years. Adam was like 800 years old when he had Seth. There was a lot of people on the planet by that time. Several generations had come by. Okay? So just wanted to let you all know that Cain married his sister. Okay? And if you really think about it, if you had your choice to marry who you gonna marry, and basically it was your sister or maybe a brother, which one you gonna marry? Because, unless you're gonna wait for some cousins to start showing up, which basically would be nieces and nephews to Cain, nieces and nephews to Cain, wasn't any cousins yet. So you couldn't marry your cousin. Like you hear some people, they talk about some people marry their cousins and stuff like that. And most people will say, oh, that's just wrong. You can't marry your sister. That's just wrong. Okay, well, who would you marry? If all the women on the planet was your sisters, and all the men on the planet were your brothers, besides your mother and father, who you gonna marry? And see, a lot of people will say that's wrong. But if you look in today's time, you'll see a brother in the Lord and a sister in the Lord get married in the church. And so if you're a brother in the Lord and you marry a sister in the Lord, you're marrying your sister in the Lord. As a matter of fact, if you don't marry a sister in the Lord and you're a brother in the Lord, or vice versa, the Bible calls you unequally yoked. And God says, be not unequally yoked. So we really have to pay attention to things like that. But I just wanted you all to know where Enoch's wife came from, because a lot of people don't know, and they make up all these other different kind of doctrines that come about, and don't believe them things, y'all. Don't get all mixed up in that stuff. They got some people talking about some crazy stuff, boy. They talk about people talking about reptiles and saying Eve slept with the snake, and there's a bunch of stuff out there that's just, way off in the left field. Anyway, Cain's wife came from Eve. It was actually Cain's sister. Okay, all right, because Eve is the mother of all. Look at Genesis chapter 3, verse 20. Eve is the mother of all the living. Okay, so she's their mother. Okay, so Cain's wife came from Eve. That's where she came from. All right. God bless. Love you all. Bye-bye.